Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Whatever the season, be it misty, be it rainy, be it cold, be it steamy. Whatever the climate. At the break of dawn, as you draw the curtains of the night aside, listening to bird call, what sets you off for the day is that cup of tea. As you lazily sip your first cup of tea, have you ever wondered about the tales which lie within? Tales which began 4,000 years ago. Some legend, some myth, some stories, some facts of history. Tales that have journeyed across ancient lands and their peoples. Chinese legend tells us of an amazing beverage with health-giving properties discovered in the 2nd century BC. To Taoists, it was an elixir of immortality. Zen myth says that in the 5th century AD, a Buddhist monk who travelled from India to China fell asleep while meditating. On awaking, he peeled off his eyelids in anger. 2 bushes sprang up where they fell, with leaves that could banish sleep. Ever since, the song of the tea kettle has kept generations awake.
जागो 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 सुबह हो गई, जल्दी से ले लो चाय ठंडी हो गई। जागो 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 सुबह हो गई, जल्दी से ले लो चाय ठंडी हो गई। मुर्गा बोले कुकड़ू हुआ सवेरा सोए क्यों, काम पे जाना देरी हो गई।
Brewed in a teapot and served in ornate china, or boiled on a stove and handed in a clay cup. Tea in India is a great leveller, feels columnist Jug Suraya.
After a really late night party in Calcutta, and as the dawn was breaking, me and some of my friends would sleepily stumble homewards, and along the route as we were walking along, we'd look out for the early morning chaiwala, whose clients were mainly thelawalas, rickshawalas, vegetable vendors, and of course people like us. So the early morning tea broke through all barriers of class or caste or creed or whatever else, these artificial barriers that we create.
Tea served to break down other social barriers in British India. Andre Patel, Professor Emeritus Sociology, Delhi University, tells us how.
Tea drinking, which was first introduced into upper middle class homes among the Western educated civil servants and professionals, was a very important occasion for bringing women out and introducing them to a new kind of social experience, sitting and drinking tea with men unrelated to them by family or kinship. And this, I think, was very important, the little tea party at which Europeans met Indians and where European ladies met their Indian counterparts. There would be hardly any other occasion for them to meet. Alcohol, I don't think, was acceptable to middle-class Indian women. But tea was important. And tea was a relatively inoffensive, innocuous beverage which could bring people together, both men and women.
Tea has an important position in the Indian economy too. As a premier foreign exchange earner, it must be looked upon not only in its local and national dimensions, but also in its global context. While making a program on the history of globalization, a documentary maker stumbled upon a story about the tea ritual. John Pickford, who spent 30 years with BBC World Service, was in Delhi last month when he narrated this.
Tea was invented as a social ritual by some very clever people who saw that in the high days of the empire, with Britain having claimed India as part of the Raj, the production of tea in India going up and the production of sugar in Britain's Caribbean colonies, which were still held then, and the whole industrial revolution, the ability to mass produce high quality china cups, and for the better off, of course, silver coming from the New World. These all came together in this ritual of the tea table. That's the sugar, the china cups and the tea, bringing bits of the empire together.
So, a beverage became a medium through which tales of global expansion and trade could be chronicled. The Dutch were the first to trade in the commodity and became the first avid tea drinkers in Europe 4 centuries ago. So ingrained is tea in Dutch culture that even today a tea ditty remains popular as a theme song on Radio Nederland at Hilversum. At 83, veteran broadcaster Amita Malik still recalls this fond memory.
When I was a little girl in Shillong, my father used to tune in to a station called Hilversum in Holland. And he was fascinated by the theme song, which also fascinated me because it was about tea. And this is how it went. I like a nice cup of tea in the morning, just to start the day, you see. And at 11:30, well, my idea of heaven is a nice cup of tea. I like a nice cup of tea with my dinner, and a nice cup of tea with my tea. And when it's time for bed, there's a lot to be said for a nice cup of tea. Well, my singing voice is not what it used to be, but I did go back to Hilversum about 15 years ago, and they were still using that theme song. I hope they will continue with it.
In Holland or Japan, Tibet or England, wherever tea has been adopted, it has occupied a central place in the culture of that country and become a way of life.
Tea has been very much a part of many and extremely diverse cultures. The tea ceremony, of course, is very famous in Japan. It combines the philosophy of Japan and its metaphysics and its social and cultural cadences. In England, the moment there's any kind of emotional crisis or something happens, the first thing is, oh, shall we have a nice hot cup of tea?
Jug Suraya goes on to say,
and it's been celebrated by writers as diverse as Charles Dickens and Dr. Johnson, Jerome K. Jerome, P.G. Wodehouse. I mean, some of the most hilarious things are set around the tea table. Of course, then you have the Mad Hatter's Tea Party in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. So tea finds innumerable references right through English literature. I mean, you have popular songs like Tea for Two and Two for Tea, You for Me and I for You. Tea has given rise to an entire corpus of literature and of entertainment.
Oh, honey, picture me upon your knee with tea for two and two for tea. Just me for you and you for me alone.
एक गरम चाय की प्याली हो, कोई उसको पिलाने वाली हो.
Has the flavour of tea seeped into Indian music and literature as well? Shunil Gangopadhyay, President Sahitya Academy, replies.
If you go to a remote village, there you will also find a tea shop. And poorest of the poor people, they also, I think, have a cup of tea sometime in the day. When I started writing, I remember the first thing in the morning I needed a cup of tea. It gave me some strength to start writing. Tea is a very much part of Indian life. So there are several references of tea in many writings. I remember one song by Tego, Chas priho chalo, chas dalo chalo, chalo he. That was quite popular at some time.
Just as the Chataka birds yearn for a drop of rain, so too parched throats long for a sip of tea.
Hi, 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 din choli jay, chas priho chalo, chato ko dalo chalo, chalo chalo he. Togo bogo yu chalo, katoli talo chalo, tolo bolo he. Hi, 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 elo chino gagono hote, purbo pavono srote, শ্যামলো রসধর পুঞ্জ শ্রাবণ বাসরে রসধর
ঝরো ঝরো ঝরে গুঞ্জ হে গুঞ্জ দল বল হে হায় 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 দিন চলে যায়
It was 1823. Robert Bruce, a Scottish trader, travelled to Upper Assam to meet Bisa Gom, chief of the Singh tribe, who cultivated a native variety of tea unknown to the rest of the world. The chief was won over by Robert Bruce, but it was left to his brother Charles to collect the precious tea saplings and send them to Calcutta, as Robert had died by then.
I had the opportunity to go through the early records of tea industry at the India Office Library, London, where I have gone through the letters of Bruce brothers written to the East India Company when tea was discovered.
Dr. Dipankar Banerji is a historian with Guwahati University.
Robert Bruce, in his correspondence with the local board of directors of East India Company at Calcutta, put a very interesting demand that he should be given permission to permanently keep 1 crate of rum, 2 elephants, 10 pounds of opium, 2 boats, and rupees 36 for the maintenance of elephants. Board of directors questioned this, and what Bruce wrote was very interesting. He wrote that Shingpho chiefs never open their mouth unless they are given rum and a dose of opium. So, to bring out the locations of tea plants which were there in the wild condition in the interior hills, they had to be given those bottles of rum and opium.
And I'm selling part away, can't divide. 1, 2 Gokul, 62 Gokul, 3 anywhere, at 63 bid, 4 Gokul, 64 rupees JV Gokul, all clear then. 63 rupees to Evergreen.
These sounds have reverberated in the auction houses of Calcutta over the last 125 years, sounding the highs and the lows of the tea trade. Calcutta was the capital of British India when tea came into the market, and it remains the hub of the Indian tea industry. There are chai shops everywhere, at every corner, highlighting the Bengali tradition of tea and talk, steaming adda sessions. Jag Suraya, who spent his formative years in Calcutta, defines this.
Adda is not just a gossip session. It's a talkathon. It's the Olympiad of conversation. And people who live in Calcutta are champions at it. They're real gold medal winners. It basically involves a group of people getting together and discussing just about anything under the sun. It could be the latest political scandal. It could be the shenanigans of a popular movie star. It could be Mohan Bagan versus Mohammedan sporting in football. One of the essential ingredients of adda is, of course, a nice cup of tea to go with it. Or, more appropriately, since Calcutta is not known for its plenitude of riches, very often at an adda, people would ask for what was known as a double half. A double half basically is 1 cup of tea, half of which gets poured into the saucer, and then 2 people can share it, one using the cup, the other using the saucer. So the double half meant that you could spend double the amount of time for half the amount of money in having adda.
Sundar Darjeeling, as the song depicts. Misty slopes of sun-kissed mountains produce the Darjeeling variety, champagne of teas, delicate of flavour. The earthy red soil of Assam produces the strength and vigour of Assam teas, the liquor. The blue mountains of Nilgiri and the green gold of Kangra Valley produce their own textures.
Would you like a cup of tea? Milk? Sugar? Ah, that's better.
Over 3 billion cups of tea are drunk every day in more than 115 countries across the globe. 1/3 of the world's tea is grown in India, 53% of it in the gardens of Assam. Tea brings with it its own local culture. The labour force, various tribal people from the Chota Nagpur area, dig their roots into the soil of Assam, leaving entrenched the stamp of their dancing feet, the lilt of their various songs, and the mix of their languages and ways. This is evident in their own unique genre of dance and music, Chumur. Dr. Bhupen Hazarika, who popularized this music and portrayed this particular lifestyle in the film Chameli Memsab, illustrates how even protest finds a place in song.
Babu bole kam kam, Babu says kam karo, kam karo, kam karo. Babu bole kam kam, Sardar bole dhoriyan. Sardar says pakdo usko. Saheb bole libo pither cham, re bideshi sham, phaki diya anili asham. The white man says, तुम्हारा पीठ का हम चमड़ा उठा देंगे मार मार के. The song is sadness against British imperialism those days.
Bhupen Hazarika's best loved song is one which immortalizes the damsel with slender, supple, delicate hands, plucking 2 leaves and a bud.
Eti koli duti pat Ratanpur bagisat la pohiya hatere kone no singile o kone no singile. एक कली 2 पत्तियां नाजुक नाजुक उंगलियां.
एकी कुही दुटी पाट रतनपुर बागीचा लह बहिया हातेरे कोने नु सिंगिले ओ कोने नु सिंगिले.
The strength of the tea industry is based on these self-same nimble fingers, fingers of a labour force predominantly female. Far from the labour lines, cutting across an invisible lifeline, lies the Bara Bungalow, where the Bara Sahib lives in colonial grandeur, sipping his cuppa.
I think that colonial planter rule itself was created around this figure of the planter. So he was like a symbolic father standing at the very center of this planting family and exerting authority as well as dispensing generosity, largesse to everybody who lived on the garden.
Preeti Gill, publishing professional, spent the early 80s as a tea planter's wife in the Duars region.
A whole lifestyle which was created by the British and by the British Memsabs in that time, who were trying to recreate a little bit of England and a little bit of home while they came to India and set up in an inhospitable, completely unknown sort of place. A lot of what they brought in remained once they went away, which was probably in the early 80s when I was there. The last lot was just about leaving. It was like going back at least a century in time, because you had fridges which ran on kerosene, you didn't have a telephone, you had runners instead who went from one garden to the other, taking your message to the other Memsab in case you wanted to have a morning cup of coffee together or something.
This particular lifestyle, far from the madding crowd with its indigenous attractions, is yet another facet of the Indian profile which could be projected through tourism. Tea life has a flavour all its own, waiting to be explored. N.K. Das, Chairman, Tea Board of India, speaks on the viability of tea tourism.
Tea tourism is an activity that encompasses so many different things, It's just not the location of the place or the ambience or the weather. It's also the culture of the people who live in these tea gardens, who live in these regions which produce tea. And it includes everything about their way of life, their festivals, the dances, the food that they eat, the cuisine that used to be prepared in the old bungalows of the British managers. They all add to a charm that you won't get anywhere else.
March 5, 1931. The Viceroy's house. Gandhiji and Lord Irwin sign a historic pact. Cause for a cup of tea.
I think we should drink to each other's health and tea.
Taking a small paper bag from a fold in his shawl, Gandhi said,
"Thank you. I will put some of the salt into my tea to remind us of the famous Boston Tea Party."
That was a clip from a docudrama to commemorate the Dundee March of 1930. There are others, too, who drink their tea with a pinch of salt, or for that matter, even tar.
I remember in 1999 during the Kargil war, we used to travel between Dras and Kargil, and the road constructors, mostly Ladakhi women, they would give us tea. And it had a tang, it had a flavor of tar. And I could immediately imagine that in that cold temperature they would boil the water on tar. In Jammu, there are areas where people still have tea with salt. And again, if you travel right up north to the valley, the kawa is a tea drunk in a very thick liquor and less sugar without milk. Well, one can roll down or drive down, say, 250 kilometers and you have Malai Marke, tea in Punjab and Haryana, especially in the line dhabas, where the tea is mostly boiled in milk and it's dust tea and a hefty dollop of cream is added on the top, and the glasses resemble the local people. They're tall and big, and truck drivers often define their journey by saying whether they want a 50-kilometer tea or 50-mile chai or 100-mile chai, meaning that the tea should be so strong that they should stay awake for that arduous GT road driving.
Pratap Chakraborty, a senior journalist with AFP, has had to travel with the breaking stories. In India, tea is an integral part of travel. Can you think of a station without a tea stall? Or a local train without the call, "Chai garam"? Sefi Bergeson, an Israeli photographer, is in Delhi working on a book on Indian street food. His fascination with Indian street tea is captured in this description of a tea stall in a crowded lane opposite Jamma Masjid.
This guy was making, I'm not joking, he had at least 50 glasses of milk that he was filling at one time. He had 3 huge pots of boiling tea on the side, on the fire. He had lined up about 50 glasses that he just chucks in sugar, like he goes like chuck, 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 like 1 spoon of sugar into each one of them. And then he takes the tea and he runs it along these 50 glasses and fills all these 50 glasses with the tea. There's this guy over there who's constantly mixing the malais, taking a pot up and letting it fall, and it looks like a lightsaber, like the white stream of milk, of hot milk falling into the pot of malai and the steam coming out of the pot. I call it chai latte, to what he's doing, because you really get the foam of the milk.
Hello, sir. Is your tea Habjan?
Thanks.
From the 2 rupee chai latte in the congested bylanes of Old Delhi to an upmarket tea bar in the heart of the city. We meet Umesh Anand, publisher, Civil Society, here. He is happy to note that the tea industry is realizing the importance of positioning tea as a lifestyle product.
Indians have always drunk tea, but it has never had the value-added position that it has now. I think that's largely because tea companies have realized that other producers of tea the world over built markets for tea by positioning the tea, by packaging it well, by creating impressions around it. So that's one thing. Many more Indians drink iced tea today than they ever did before. I remember writing a piece on tea 20 years ago, doing some reportage in the tea industry. And the only market for iced teas was in America. Literally, there's a growing market in India. So there is a change. And sure, that has got a lot of that has got to do with how you present tea. A lot of it's also got to do with tea being seen as being healthier to drink than coffee or cola or something like that.
How much health and nutrition is there in a cup of tea? The answers come from a nutritionist and a tea scientist.
When you boil tea leaves and milk together and you reuse tea leaves, or even if you're not reusing, you're boiling the tea in the milk. Now, the calcium in the milk and the proteins in the milk, they bind to the active compounds in the tea leaves and they kind of neutralize the beneficial amount. So there is no benefit in that kind of tea. Also, it leads to acidity because of that toxic combination.
Dr. Shikha Sharma, nutritionist and dietitian.
So whatever benefits of tea one talks about, it is primarily from green tea, from oolong tea, and even from black tea, but black tea without milk and sugar. Now, green tea is unique because it stimulates and activates your nerves but doesn't make it hyperstimulation. And of course, it keeps you awake and active so you can concentrate better.
Many of the lifestyle diseases are prevented by tea.
Professor N.K. Jain, editor, International Journal of Tea Sciences.
Tea polyphenol have been found to be powerful antioxidants, and they scavenge free radical oxygen, which is found in free radical form in its metabolism of food, etc. These RO-mediated diseases like cancer, cardiovascular ailments, oral hygiene problems, diabetes, viral infections, arthritis, and even premature aging is prevented by consumption of tea.
So here are the tales of a beverage for all reasons, for sharing moments of intense addas and serious discussions, wakeful thinking and reaching out in commiseration, for caring and curing. An elixir of life, as the Chinese called it. Steaming hot or soothing cold, a constant companion. A cup of cheer. How about it? A cup of tea for you and me?
Tea for two, and two for tea. Me for you, and you for me alone.